the next thing I want to kind of jump into is the McGirt deal. And we talked about this quite a bit on our Wednesday deal. So the governor ran a forum about the McGirt decision, which is the Supreme Court case that basically shifted the jurisdiction for criminal cases back to the tribes. So large parts of eastern and southern Oklahoma now are technically tribal jurisdiction, so it takes it away from the district attorneys and other local forces. So this thing was a disaster. Stitt threatened to shut it down early. He ended up doing it because there were protests, and he basically they put together this whole event. They invited, but they didn't like coordinate with or actually get any tribal representation to be there. It was all district attorneys who from that part of the state who are mad that they don't have jurisdiction anymore and can't prosecute. And then Stitt was there asking questions like about property taxes because that has anything to do with criminal jurisdiction. That's what he's worried about because the tribes get more power, they might have power to do some other stuff. But the real problem with this whole event was just the lack of representation and the fact that they the whole argument, like everything that Stitt kind of does, is built on bad faith. I mean, you have this state that is the number one incarcerator on the planet. We have relatively high crime rates. We have lots of violent crime, overall. And you have them arguing that we should be the ones to administer justice in this state. While the feds and the tribes actually do a substantially better job by any objective measure of it. So, and the other thing too, like just philosophically or legally around this, and Ron, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but is like this was a Supreme Court case. Like it wasn't like the tribes did something to make this happen. It wasn't like they said, hey, we want to take jurisdiction back from the state. I mean, they'll take it if they were given it, but they didn't it was just the Supreme Court had a case and they decided it. And
most they did was write what's called amicus briefs, which is friends of the court brief, to give guidance to the court as to why they believe a certain outcome should be what it is. McGirt was a state prisoner. And he said the state did not have jurisdiction to prosecute him, and he sued and went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with him. The tribes didn't ask McGirt to sue no fucking body. McGirt sit down and said, "I'm indigenous, and they don't have the right to prosecute," and it went to the Supreme Court. That's what it is. The issue, the first thing you ask when someone does something this obviously stupid, is like, what were you thinking, right? Because why would you have a forum on McGirt and not have any indigenous representation? You say, well, they didn't call us back. Well, if they didn't call you back, you canceled the fucking event. Because you like in a reasonable mind, it's like, this is a fucking PR nightmare, right? And even beyond that, you didn't have to have a fucking forum on the 1 year anniversary. Most people didn't even know it's fucking 1 year anniversary. You could have just released a bland, stupid fucking press release that no one would have read. A few people would have tweeted about it, probably Oklahoma Progress Now. And that would have been and we got some retweets, that would have been what it was. You didn't have to do this. So now getting to why Stitt did it. And here's why I believe Stitt did it. Stitt did it he knew that if he didn't invite indigenous folks, if they rightfully would be upset. And then after they rightfully became upset, he acted like it was a huge deal and shut it down early and immediately leaned into the culture wars. It's made it about, we represent the victims, they represent the people who are the victimizers, and because it's us representing the interests of the victims, we are the inherently moral side. You should ride with us, this culture war, these grievances. And the ultimate goal, as it always is getting the state to support him, because he doesn't want McGirt to mean that the tribes can have any power over its oligarchical homes. That's what it is. It was create a culture war, create a grievance to bolster support amongst Oklahomans, so that in hopes that will lead to some type of power play down the road after tribes decide to tax more or regulate more impose any kind of cost on your oligarchical homies. That's why he slipped. I think the property tax thing was kind of a slip. Like it wasn't supposed to be
Yeah.
victim, but he gave it away. He don't
Yeah.
go. Kevin Stitt give a fuck about victims, especially indigenous victims. He don't give a fuck about them. Kevin Stitt gives a fuck about 1 cent more if the tribes gain power to do such. And I don't do. I haven't looked into like the civil aspect of where this could go. But if they have the power to impose any additional costs on its oligarchical homeboys, or maybe make the tribes become in competition with them, right? Give them a competitive leg up in any way against oligarchical homies. That's Kevin Stitt's only job, is to protect the oligarchical interest at any cost. And the way he figured, again, as is the broad fucking modern conservative movement, you can't be who they really are, which is we want to protect oligarchs. Kevin Stitt can't have a forum saying, well, listen, McGirt gonna cost my oil and gas homies their 15th yacht, and so we don't want to fuck with it. That doesn't work. So what do? You create controversy and say we represent the victims. You should come with us. That was all he did. That was his goal.
And Catherine Sweeney points out her analysis, which I agree with 100%, is to everyone saying the forum was a communications failure last night. It wasn't. Gearing up for this exact story, which they got. The approach further alienates opponents and further solidifies supporters. They're good at what they're doing. And yeah, what it was is the framing of victims versus perpetrators or people who commit crimes. My argument that I would like to see is all the criminal justice reform people riding to save this, or riding into this fight to be like, what? We want to give these guys power? I mean, the DAs are all up in 2022, all 27 of them. Most of them aren't going to draw opposition because they're so powerful that they can use the power of their office to prevent other attorneys from running against them. That's how corrupt and power hungry these guys are. And guess what? It's not fucking working. They are locking up mentally ill people, addicted people, people suffering from poverty. The tribes and the feds, for all their flaws, do a much better job. I mean, the tribes, I think philosophically, just don't necessarily believe in throwing away, hundreds of thousands of humans or thousands of humans through a carceral state. But the feds tend to have lower recidivism because they don't treat, they're like, well, if we've got you, we're going to give you something for this time you're in. And they train people and they help people and they get them treatment and whatever else. So I wish we could broaden this argument. I mean, I totally get the tribal sovereignty thing and appreciate the, shout out to all the indigenous activists that were there. Sarah Gray had a lot of she live tweeted it, really went hard at Stitt for his grotesque behavior toward them. But my challenge politically is the tribes just aren't a political entity large enough to really take on the large conservative movement in Oklahoma. And I just think there are a lot of natural allies that we could, especially too, because McGirt at its core is about criminal jurisdiction. And we have a massive criminal justice problem in Oklahoma. I mean, we are the worst at it. We have the highest incarceration rate. And so, I'm just frustrated, disappointed, confused at why it feels like so many advocates are sort of sitting on the sidelines and not attacking Stitt directly for his inaction and inability to do this, and instead letting the DA's grandstand like they give a single F about victims or anything else. It's really, really obnoxious.
Yeah, this is what happens when you get in bed with these people, right? When by these people, I mean modern conservative dickheads. And so you build these coalitions with them and they're about criminal justice reform and we're about criminal justice reform. But they're not. They're about maintaining plutocracy. And jail has become too expensive and prisons have become too expensive for them, and they don't feel like they should have to, their money should go to caging human beings. They don't mind the caging of human beings, they don't want to pay for it. Yeah. Right? And you can't get in bed with someone like that because inevitably, if what's guiding and motivating them is not an actual care about human beings, regardless of what they're accused of, then there's inevitably going to be some divergence. And here it just happens to be on McGirt. So they're sitting on the sidelines, not wanting to alienate Stitt.
Yeah. So I mean, the tribes are gonna have to fight because I don't know if it's an existential threat to him for sure, but I mean, Stitt wants to roll back McGirt, which I don't even know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, but I don't even know. Is that, I mean, once it's been decided by the Supreme Court, is it just like, is he just going to try to peel off parts of it?
I mean, what the state? I think the state has once the Supreme Court decides, it's kind of gunsmoke. I think the state has like engaged in lawsuits about other elements of McGirt. What would happen though is more than likely, so the AG would probably like seek some sort of guidance, right? But the Supreme Court would like, fuck you, we're not gonna take that. So I mean, the state would probably pass a law, and then the tribe would sue them, and they get to the Supreme Court for some type of clarity. Um, but even then, the lower circuits will probably knock it down if it's just like a blatant, it blatantly violates McGirt because McGirt has been decided. Like this is their shit. You can try to like and that's really Kevin Stitt. Kevin Stitt is getting in front of potential civil costs to the oligarchs. That's his primary concern, right? So, and he's getting in front of that. So remember when he had that panel like last year during COVID, or some? No, he started some like working group, and it was a bunch of like oil and gas guys. Like, what the fuck would that do with indigenous? What are you talking about? But that's where his motivations lie.